Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels basketball recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting, Mr. David Sisk, longtime AAU college, high school coach. He's seen the sport from a lot of different lenses, and that's one of the reasons why we always have him on, talk about recruiting and certainly steering our basketball recruiting ship. And David, these days are different than a few years ago. We've got transfer portal chaos, and we've got kids that can up and leave a school and go to a new school. And next thing you know, they're practicing somewhere else weeks later. And that looks like it's going to be the case now with Dawson Garcia, a 6'11", 235-pound sophomore who just played 1 year as a freshman at Marquette. In fact, he scored 24 points and had 11 rebounds in the Warriors' upset of the Tar Heels in the Dean Dome back in February. He was a huge reason why on both ends of the court that night, and of course on the glass. So Dawson Garcia hits the portal. Hubert Davis reaches out, and he brings in the third transfer portal since being hired 3+ months ago. What are your thoughts on Carolina luring in Dawson Garcia?
It's a home run. The last one of these that we did, we talked about how Seth Trimble was really a guy that got the momentum going as far as recruiting goes. But, Dawson Garcia, this one resonates across the board. One of the very top guys out there. We look at July, like you said, and it's not like it was. You've got guys had to July the 1st to put their name in the portal. They had to July the 7th to pull out of the NBA draft process. And you saw three really good college players that were available after July the 4th, Dawson Garcia, Kofi Cockburn, and Marcus Carr. And I would put Garcia up at the head of the list. I've made the statement he was my favorite player in the country last year. I think he just causes a lot of matchup problems. And you're talking about a guy who was, made a very serious run for Big East Freshman of the Year. And that's a conference with Villanova and some others that recruit very well. So obviously, like I said, a home run for Hubert Davis, a home run for North Carolina. And you're talking about a guy that can come in and contribute right off the bat in multiple ways.
Let me throw a few numbers out there for everybody. 13 points a game, 6.6 rebounds. He scored 24 points, grabbed 11 boards in Marquette's win in Chapel Hill. Garrison Brooks had 18 that game. He wasn't always on him. He was guarding Brooks at times. He was guarding Armando Bacot at times. They were on Sharp at times. Sharp and Bacot combined for just 12 points. And Carolina really struggled scoring. They struggled down low a lot in that game. He was a huge reason why. He forced some travels. He forced Bacot to step on the baseline at one point for a violation. Some of his big games, he had 28 at Villanova. He had 20+ against Xavier, St. John's, Providence. Had a couple of struggles, though. Had 4 against Oklahoma State, 3 against DePaul, and did not score in 27 minutes against Seton Hall, which was the game before the UNC game. What do you make about some of those high ends and low ends that he experienced as a freshman at Marquette?
I can't give really an educated guess on that because I didn't watch all those games. But, Marquette had a struggle too. And you never know, unless you're in a locker room, and, you'll hear Charles Barkley and guys like that all the time when people are making comments about, sports writers. And he says, how can they know? You don't know unless you're in the locker room every day. So I wasn't in the locker room every day, obviously. I don't know. I think this was a team that had a lot of expectations talking about Marquette last year. They were a 500 team. Wojciechowski lost his job. So you and especially you're a freshman. I think that's one thing, too. The first thing I would say that leads to inconsistencies is a freshman. I think they all go through it at one time or another. But you were talking about a very inconsistent team, too. So I don't know. Maybe all that went together. Maybe they fed off each other. Maybe he needed a more stable environment than what he has had, rather. So I don't know, but I expect him to be more consistent as a sophomore.
6'11". I don't know the wingspan. I have to look it up. But in watching him in person back in February, and then watching some stuff here the last couple of days, he looks like he's got like a 7'1" wingspan in that range. A couple of things I like about him, and it's unique. He's left-handed, so he's easy to kind of see on the court in that sense too. But also, he's a guy that plays his length. He looks his length at all times. He can drive to the basket some. He doesn't dart to the rim, but most 6'11" guys don't dart to the rim. He looks fairly comfortable playing with his back to the basket, and he can step away, shoot a three. He's comfortable with the 15-footer. And I think when we talked a lot in the last couple of months about what Hubert wants to do, how he envisions his team playing, Dawson Garcia is a guy that can back up Armando, and he can back up Brady Manick if he indeed is the sixth man, because he can fill that stretch four, and he can also be a post presence. He already showed Carolina in person he could be a post presence.
I don't know if you start Brady Manick in front of him. The people I've talked to think that basketball people think he's much better than Brady Manick. Now,
he had a better year last year than Brady Manick, by the way.
I want to say this. And this was something when I knew we were going to be going on that I was trying to get my thoughts together on it. For those of you who read my article on with an interview that we had on the Kyle Filipowski offer, interviewed Andy Borman, his AAU coach with the New York Rens. He's just coached just a ton of guys, college players, pro players. And we had a discussion in there about the evolution of new age basketball, of that stretch player, that stretch big, that used to be a stretch guy, which means you stand out there, you stretch the floor because you're a catch and shoot guy. You stand out there and shoot. But he started talking about how Filipowski can shoot, but he's not that guy. He's a playmaker at that size. And I got to kind of thinking about Garcia. And, you know, you look at Luka Doncic, you look at Kevin Durant, you look at guys, there's so many of those guys now that puts the ball on the floor at 6'11", at 6'10", and can score in the paint, can get to the rim, can make the three, and they're playmakers. And that's what he said about Filipowski. He's a playmaker. He's not a stretch guy. And we were talking about how just the overall improvements, because – look, if you had guys 6'11", you wouldn't let them play perimeter years ago. I had a kid when I coached AAU, and he was a good three-point shooter. And he was about 6'9" or so. And I remember telling him, get your ass down on the block. 6'9" guys were not made to stand out there and shoot threes. I don't care how good you shoot them. You get down there where you're back to the bucket. Now, that was 20 years ago. And he went on to East Tennessee State and had a really good career. So what I'm trying to say is that role as that 4, as that 5 playing out on the floor, this thing has started to develop among basketball people and being able to coach it and the whole philosophy with it, where now it's just not like, okay, you're 6'11", you're more of a finesse player. You stand up there and shoot the three. Now you're 6'11", you put it on the floor, you go create, you go score, you draw the defense, you get people open. Now, where am I going with this? Brady Manick is a true catch and shoot stretch. If you look at his numbers last year, I think 56% of his shots, I did the numbers a while ago before we came on, 56% of his shot attempts were three-pointers. Dawson Garcia was 29% of his shots were three. Now, what does that mean? That means you could even play Garcia at the 5 and put him in the pick and roll with Manick outside the three-point line stretching, and Garcia has all that room to work in the paint. So I think he can play the 5 too. It also means that he can step out on the floor. You can play Baycott in a block. He shoots well enough. He still shot like 38, 39%, if I'm not mistaken, from 3. May not be that number, but it was a good number and of makes. So he can still do that. He can still draw defense out. He's a matchup nightmare because you put a bigger guy on him, he can go by him. So I believe he offers more than Manick does simply because he's got a larger package of what he can do offensively. You were talking
Yeah.
about what he does defensively. I think he can play the 4. I think he can play the 5. And I think that he fits in perfectly with either guy. And here's what I would say. If him and Mannix on the floor at the same time, look for that high ball screen in the middle, just like they did against North Carolina, where he either pops on a switch or the big's on him. He pops, the big steps out, he goes by him. That's what he did against North Carolina. He didn't kill him with a 3. He forced Baycott and Brooks and those guys to guard him out top at the 3-point line, and they could not do it. And he got at the rim at will. So he offers all these different things and a variety of things where Manic, I think, can score some in there, but he's more of the stretch. I see Garcia as a guy, like I said, a playmaker who can do a lot of things in that frame.
Manic is a terrific catch and shoot weapon. He's got an amazingly quick catch and shoot release. But you're right about that. We've actually talked. We did a podcast like a month and a half ago about what happens if you've got Walton out there and Leakey out there and Manic out there, for example, as the 2, 3, and 4. None of those guys are drivers. And that can create some problems as well. When you throw Garcia out there, if you have a 4 that can make defenses move, that could screw up a lot of defenses. It's going to create opportunities for Baycott. It's going to take away your help defense. So if Caleb Love drives or RJ Davis drives, they're going to have a more open lane, a less contested lane to the basket. I think it creates a lot of stuff. But I like what you're saying, the two of them playing off each other. Think about that threesome right there, about how Hubert's got a lot of minutes that he can use with those guys. If he wants to throw that too powerful guy, big guy on the block look, he can certainly do it defensively with Garcia. He can handle the load on the block defensively, and he could also play the part offensively if he has to as well. Manic is not as good on the block offensively, and he's not as good on the block defensively. So you've got, with those 3 guys, you can score in every conceivable fashion you would ever want from your 4 and 5 from a combination of them.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, he just – the word you hear now, and we've heard for the last couple of years in recruiting circles, why do coaches like so-and-so? When I interview a kid, why do coaches like you? Or I'm interviewing an AAU coach. Why do they like your player? And the word seems now it's versatility. He can play multiple positions. He can guard multiple positions. He can do different things. He's not a one-trick pony. And the more versatility that you have, the more ways you can contribute and the more reasons you give the coach to play you. So you look at, like I said, you look at Dawson Garcia and there's just multiple things that he can do. And now look at the guy, like I said, can play the 4 or the 5. He's not pigeonholed at all.
Okay, unfair question perhaps, but does this maybe make Carolina an ACC contender and perhaps even a Final Four contender? I think it does. I think it does.
I mean, if you look before they had Garcia, they've been in a lot of guys, early top 25s, top 50s and all that. They've been
around 15 to 18, 20.
I've seen 18 to about 22. I haven't seen, you may have seen some recently where they got up.
Somebody sent me something where I think they were as high as 15. I don't remember what it was. I don't give a lot of credence to that stuff. It's more for podcasts like this.
Yeah.
But I do think this bumps them up several notches.
There's so many, just looking at rosters, there's so many good teams out there right now when you watch this. And what happens of all the transfers, like I've said, these teams get older and they bring – and it seems like in basketball because of it, the rich get richer. Yeah. And you'll see a team that was top 15, and they lose everybody they've got, and they add 10 really good players. And you look at them the next year and they're – the top 10, top 15 again. Now, you've got to work the reload, but it's kind of one of those things we don't rebuild, we reload. And I think you see a lot more teams, really successful ones, do that. But look, right now, when you're talking about a team, can they get to the Final Four? I think probably anybody in the range in the top 15 to top 20 teams are candidates for that. And we'll just have to see, how good they are, because I think we got to see, obviously, as the year went on, how good Baylor was, how good Florida State was, how, Alabama, different UCLA, different things like, and he hit different points of the year. So, if you played the 1 seeds on your bracket last year, you got washed out of it pretty well. So, like I said,
this is going to be an evolutionary process.
For that, and let the season play out.
David, this is going to be an evolutionary process because we got to see how the guards are. What the assist turnover ratio, much improved from a year ago. 3-point shooting percentage, much improved. Decision making. Do they run what Hubert calls? They didn't always run what Roy called. How does Hubert handle things? How does he evolve as a coach? How does he handle, a tense late game situation in the Mohegan Sun in late November versus how he handles it in February? I think the parts on paper are there to be significant. And if things come together, they are a candidate to have a very, very good season. But there are so many question marks right now. I think you can say, yes, potential's there, but we got to wait and see. And it's like that with a lot of teams out there, especially because of all these new parts mixing in. We have no idea how the chemistry is going to work here. On paper, it looks like Dawson Garcia is a great addition. I can't imagine that they would bring this kid in if they questioned anything about potential chemistry issues. So I think a lot of these things are going to work out, but they need a lot of things to work out that were an issue last year for them to be that team. But like you said, we've seen teams make these jumps before, and I do think the potential is there with this group.
When your final 3 teams are North Carolina, Illinois, and Arizona, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
And like you said, when next year's teams, there are question marks. I agree with you 100%. The tools are there. We know this is a talented backcourt, but we're just not sure. What's on paper and what actually happens are 2 totally different things. I mean, you've got to play the game. So that's, like you say, it's what we're going to see. We don't know about Hubert yet as a coach. We're going to find out. I do think, though, that, and I would tell anybody this, it's not because I'm here on the THI podcast, that I do think you're going to see an improved Caleb Love and an improved RJ Davis next year. Number 1, a year of experience, but number 2, more space to play in. And I just did not like last year a lot of times the chemistry there. And I'm going to be honest with you. There's a lot of times I wasn't blaming on Caleb Love. Caleb Love is looking to play in freedom, looking to try to get to the rim. And you got 500 pounds of big man at all times standing in the lane. I mean, there was no room to drive. There was no room to play in freedom. You had to be a robot last year at the guard spot. And that's just the way I feel about it. And I think Hubert knew that, because Hubert has said, we're going to play more in space. We're still going to play fast, but we're going to play a lot more in space, a lot more driving lanes, a lot more stretching, more shooters. Man, I could just watching Caleb Love from high school and RJ Davis from high school. I think they're just like, thank you, Lord.
So you lose Garrison Brooks, you lose Andrew Platek, you lose Walker Kessler, who didn't produce much until late, and you lose Day'Ron Sharpe. A lot of talent there, some experience there, but you bring in the 14th all-time leading scorer at Oklahoma, and then you bring in 2 of the guys that Roy Williams recruited but went elsewhere, and both of whom Roy really wanted. And McCoy is a guy, when you watch the Virginia stuff, he's a guy that helps. And some of the production that he gave Tony Bennett last year came at really important parts of games. So I think Hubert's done a nice job replenishing and moving everything forward. We'll get to see them for the first time, I guess, in late September, if there's a late night for Hubert or something like that. And it's only a few months away. And I guess, 3 months away, 4 months away, they're going to start playing basketball games. So the chemistry stuff's got to get in gear pretty quickly. So Dawson Garcia will probably be in Chapel Hill soon and working out with these guys, because they got to start developing that stuff now. Any final thoughts, David?
Yeah, Andrew, I'll bring up 2 old-timers here that we probably not heard their names in 4 or 5 years, but that's DeMarco Dunn and Dontre Styles. I'm interested to see. They're going to be, I think, it seems like it's been 10 years since we talked about them. So they're going to be 28-year-old freshmen. But I'm interested to see kind of how they fit in, because and I think they can. I remember when, Jamie Shaw talking about with Don Trez, he said, And Roy was coaching at that time, and he says this could be Roy's outlet to really set on a four who can play out on the floor. So we know about his athleticism. I'm interested to see what he brings. And, man, DeMarco Dunn is just a bucket getter. You know, he can shoot. He can score. You know, he's a three-level scorer in high school. You know, I'm just curious of all these guys. You know, there's so many additions. It's a deep roster. Just how all these guys can fit in. And we may have guys making fits, you know, are really making a jump and helping this team immensely that we're not even thinking about right now.
And by the way, what I'm hearing about Dontrez is he has surprised everybody with his ability to consistently hit, not just from the perimeter 3-point range, but that 15 to 18 footer that any good four is going to need to hit. Now, and he can maybe even, you know, there's talk about maybe some three stuff. We'll worry about that when we get into the fall. But I'm hearing good things about Dontrez Styles. Kind of came in playing better basketball than was expected, and the expectations were pretty high. Dawson Garcia, the third kid from the transfer portal to come into North Carolina. They got a guy from Virginia, Oklahoma, and Marquette. They're beefing this roster up. Hubert Davis has the big man that a lot of Carolina fans were hoping he would bring in, but he can do a lot more than be a big man. This is a nice addition for North Carolina. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. Thanks for stopping by.